whatever success I'm seeing is from podcasts that have become vodcasts.
Traditional media, in many ways, tends to be a little bit more combative from the past.
Basically, the biggest concern for creators is how to monetize your content.
One of the things that we have struggled with is finding brands who are willing to engage for 52 weeks on a podcast.
You have tried possibly every way to make money from podcasting, and you and I have had a conversation a couple of months ago where you said, "Bahut ho gaya," right? You said, "Ki yaar, it's really tough." So do you want to quickly give us your 1-minute summary on the challenges that the industry faces as far as podcasting goes?
I don't know if a 1-minute summary is possible, but I'll try. There are a lot of challenges in this space just in terms of who the buyers are versus how the content is being made and made available to people. While podcasting has a really high share of mind, the numbers are generally low compared to what you would see in Instagram or what you would see on YouTube or other platforms like that. That leads to a situation where it's a tough negotiation to kind of get somebody to get on board with it. And you can make all the arguments you want about enlightened audience which is paying a lot of attention, but at the end of the day, if you're unable to get it supported in the right ways, then you're kind of in a tough boat. And for us, it has been a struggle over the last few years for sure. And we've come out of it. I think that we're at a point where we're in a reasonably okay position right now. We had our first profitable quarter, if you will, last quarter. But I'm still I feel like we need to get more, we need to do more, we need to make more. And I think, apologies to Mantra, but video is the route.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, that whatever success I'm seeing is from podcasts that have become vodcasts, right? And now you've got, as long as you see the face, I guess Gen Z wants to see these people to some degree, and which is why when you put it on YouTube, suddenly you end up with those numbers. That's what seems to be working.
So what I'd say is, right, I think that both things matter. We did a meetup for Brightest fans in January or something like that this year. And I asked most of the people there, are you audio listeners or video viewers? Almost entirely audio listeners, I'd say 80%. These are your most engaged fans. These are the people who come in and who honestly really care about what you do. But at the same time, I know what my numbers say. And my Cyrus video numbers are more than 10x of what my audio numbers are. So, reality is reality, and you have to kind of live in the world as it is, I guess.
No, it's great to know that. Rohan, I'm going to come to you and just ask you, because you work with brands and PR, I've seen so many founders who've started their podcasts, and I see more money in companies that are helping them make their podcasts than, of course, they're burning money. Many of them are spending a couple of lakhs an episode, getting great guests. Whether I see the founder of Zerodha, or whether I see, Bombay Shaving Company, whether I see Lenskart, I see all of these founders who suddenly want to be seen and are using that. Is that a route? What is the route that you have to come across, or where do you see your brands shying away or investing in podcasting?
You look at it from two perspectives. One, let's look at the corporate executive. It gives the corporate executive today a huge opportunity to not just focus on the company, but also on his persona. So there's a deeper connect. If you look at it from their point of view, traditional media, in many ways, tends to be a little bit more combative from the past. This allows it to be more cooperative. So one, they have better control on the messaging. Two, like you mentioned, the Gen Z and the millennials want to see a face, want to understand the person. It breaks down barriers. So the whales go missing. It brings the CEO or an executive much more closer to the audience. So from a corporate standpoint, there is a lot more merit from an engagement standpoint.
I think that's two brilliant points you made. That A, it brings them closer to an audience for one level, and they are more in control of the message.
Yes.
So why I'm interjecting is only to ask you that out of your clients, how many of them, what percentage are coming to you saying, let's think of a podcast?
Can I just step back and tell you,
Sure.
Look at it slightly differently. And I'll give you just a time frame of 5 years. And probably this will set context to it. So when we were advising clients or strategizing with them, 5 years ago, forget 5 actually, let's just take a couple of years ago. The question would be, should we be doing a podcast? Cut to maybe a year or so ago, it was a good to do. So from should we be there to a good to do, I can guarantee you, and I'm not saying it because I'm sitting here in this forum, it is a must do. It's literally part of every strategic deck to a client, right? It's just a matter of where do you want to be. So depending on lifestyle, I mean, the other part of your question, if it's not the executive and it's the corporate, why are they and what are they looking for? It just allows you, there's no concept of niche anymore. So one is, from a point of view of masses to niche, a brand can engage in multiple ways in a podcast, right? So you have communities, you have niche audiences, your engagements are that much more better. So from that point of view, what you're seeing today is it's an integral part of a plan. There's no longer a media plan. Those days are gone. It's now what's the engagement plan looking like? And that tells you a story. And this is a 2-year story.
But that's fantastic. I mean, to say that from, somebody is presented in a plan and it's last slide on the deck, to being a good to do to a must do, I think that's a great thing. So anybody who's looking at it, there's an opportunity.
One last point, Roshan, just to drive in that point. We made a pitch deck a couple of days ago to a client. There was no mention of any traditional media on that slide. Now, it depends what category you're talking to, of course. But let me not get into which category this was. But in this particular pitch deck, all you had was podcasts. And I'm not kidding you. This is actually, there's a mindset shift, and there's therefore a shift from the industry point of view as well.
That's fantastic. So I'll just take that a step further for the audience who's here, which is the fact of saying that, most techs today do not have traditional media referenced. When we are developing campaigns at Commune, which are culture-led, there's all the engagement we are talking of is non-traditional. So I definitely get that. Seetal here has actually got some brilliant examples of how large corporates have created internal podcasts to reach out to their audiences. And this is the brands like TCS, Infosys, etc. And coming from WorldSpace, which is already a niche medium, right? It was
right.
satellite radio, which was doing quality programming.
Yeah.
But again, in India, everybody wants everything for free.
That's
right?
correct. And interesting that you brought up WorldSpace, because back in the day, I don't think a lot of people realize this, but for WorldSpace to enjoy somebody's mindshare about 15 years after it died in this country is something, because at the end of the day, it had only 1 lakh paying subscribers ever. So I find
1 lakh paying subscribers.
in the life, so 5.5 lakhs in the lifetime of WorldSpace,
Yeah.
and when we shut shop, it was 1 lakh and some. So really astounding that a brand like that, which had only that many paying subscribers, is actually even today remembered for what it is. But yes, to come to your point of the corporate world, so for about 14 years, this is a very interesting animal, because it has wanted to communicate better with its employee, engage better, inform, share knowledge, etc., and it's not wanted to do it via email. But what else other than emails, right? Everybody knows that we hit delete on the HR email or whoever's email. Unless, of course, it's a news of a raise, which most likely is not going to happen. But other than that, organizations like Amazon, Flipkart, and this is cross-sector. So you can have consulting firms like Deloitte or Boston Consulting, Pfizer and Cipla and Pharma. So these are the folks who've been using GoMMT Make My Trip, by the way, does a daily podcast. And this is like Monday to Friday, half an hour of talk content with employee voices. And I think Murthy, who was here from Federal Bank, used a very nice phrase. He said, we need to democratize the property that's a podcast, right? Celebrities, great. Influencers, great. Thought leaders, great. But what about the average person? Do they get a voice? And I think the corporate podcast really does that for you and me. We get heard, and not you, of course, but me. We get heard in organizations because they have an internal podcast. And that culture of listening is what this product does. And yes, we get to make money. People like us get to make money in the end. Not big, but
no, but it's
there.
fantastic. So guys, look at what you've already had as opportunities that have been presented. Here is running internal corporate podcast, which Seetal says she's been doing for over 14 years, right? There's business there. And there are so many corporates in India which have 100,000 plus employees. I went to speak to a leadership team in Hyderabad, and I promise you, to get to that building took me about 20 minutes, because there was building after building after building just filled with people. And when I spoke to 1 or 2 event people, they said on a weekly basis we have to think of engagement, right? So here is a great way of engaging. What Rohan just said, honesty, I thought it's brilliant that now it is a must do in a deck. Now, what is important is if you're an individual podcaster, if you are a podcaster and you want to put your voice out there, will these methods work? I don't know, because you've got to have enough of an audience size to do it. And I think that's where Surajit might actually have an answer for you. Because my first thing was when somebody showed me Toyo, I was like, what is it right? Do you pronounce it as Toyo only?
Toyo.
Yeah?
It stands for Tokenize Your World.
Tokenize your
World.
Your world. Tokenize your world. I didn't even know that. That's fabulous. So I think that's wonderful. Tokenize your world. Now, during that brief period when everybody was creating NFTs of everything from the hair on their leg to their shoe to a dash of paint, but honestly, blockchain and the fact that you can legitimately own a piece of content is genuinely a way forward. I see this trend when I travel abroad all the time. It was a big topic of discussion at South by Southwest. Everybody was talking about saying how can they break up, rights into things, but the whole issue was how will you track it, which is what I think somewhere you've cracked. So why don't you tell people about how you can tokenize your world?
So
in podcast.
Yeah, in podcast. So it's first of all, we are world's first multi-category alternate asset marketplace wherein you can invest into movies, music, and art. There were a few problem statement, and podcast also is, it's basically the biggest concern for creators is how to monetize your content. And because with so much of competition around and individual podcasters. So we partner with creators. We tokenize, we create a value for that. For example, you create a 12-episode podcast and you say that, these are the guys who are coming. This is the potential viewership we are going to get. And we put a value to it. And we tokenize it and we let people invest in that. So you on day one, before you sort of release the podcast, you have a community of people who are actually invested in you. So that's great because when you talk about crowdfunding, you don't give anything in return. But here, they have an opportunity to have a financial financial share in your success. So this is what we are doing at Toyo, which we are calling circular economy. In music, we are partnering with artists to drop songs, fresh songs, wherein the investors, it's about more you stream, more you earn. So if you do, so the idea is that when it's hundreds of thousands of content songs being released on a daily basis, how do you get to the chart on the top? So if you have 200,000 investors of a song, which is say for a top artist should be as $1 million, on day one, those guys are going to keep streaming and bring you at the top. So this is what we are trying to solve at Toyo by partnering with creators and creating a whole ecosystem where the whole model is democratized enough for everyone to have a piece of
So that's fantastic. No, that's fantastic. I think I wanted to give you all an example because a very dear friend of mine, Amit Varma, is somebody who I think all of us who worked in podcasting know of. And Amit is a person who's been a prolific podcaster with a show called The Seen and the Unseen for the last 5 years. What he has built is, I look on that model as something phenomenal, which is where Amit has a dedicated listenership, and whenever I've spoken to him, he said, listen, my average listening is 30 to 40,000 people. But it's 30 to 40,000 dedicated people, and he runs 2 commercials on his show. One is about a writing workshop he does over 4 weekends, which is 10,000 rupees a person. Every month, Amit gets 80 to 100 sign-ups. Now do the math straight away. That's 10 lakh rupees a month. Just from the course he runs on a weekend for 1 hour Saturday, 1 hour on Sunday, and he does this constantly. He brings these people into an internal group, so he's built a beautiful community. The second is what he does, which is saying, hey, for the price of a coffee or the price of a meal, you can actually be a part of this podcast because I'm never going to make this full of advertising. So in a way, he's saying, if you want to play gatekeeper to listenership, right? If you want to build community, let's do it internally. And it's a great success. I mean, that's all he's doing. And you should see the engaged community he's built on WhatsApp. It's absolutely brilliant. You should look at the podcast and the course at some level. Amit, I'm going to come back to you because when podcasters, because there's so many podcasters in the room, when they approach brands, what are 3 or 4 things that they should definitely have in their deck? I'm actually going to go around the room and see if anybody else has anything to add to that.
So if you're a current podcaster, numbers, obviously. But I think to be very honest here, right? One of the things that we have struggled with is finding brands who are willing to engage for 52 weeks on a podcast. They don't want to be part of 52-week shows. They want to be part of 10-week shows, 12-week shows. So when you're doing that, then it becomes this like kind of this alchemy, right? You need to find the right, and again, so this is for us. I guess I don't know if this applies to individual podcasters. For individual podcasters, sorry, I'm being a little this, right? But for individual podcasters, I think that it is more about numbers, what you're going to be able to deliver, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to the way that we're seeing brands engage, it's a challenge for individual podcasters. I think that most people who are doing this individually, if you're able to do something like what Amit has been able to crack, or what Chuck and Utsav have been doing recently, they've done something in the same kind of space. Chuck hosted a show called Simplified and the Origin of Things. Utsav hosted a podcast called Postcards from Nowhere. They are also doing something in this kind of how to be a weekend creator type space, right? I think if you can find something like that, coursework or some other alternate method of monetization, that is likely to succeed for you. Brands in India, there are not that many. The ones who are going to have budgets for podcasting are typically fairly large. They are going to want certain things out of you, which is going to be very hard. And I don't mean to be discouraging, but it is hard.
So you're being honest, which is what is so important. I think, rather than give everybody the shabash, do it, it's a different story.
Yeah.
But get the numbers. I think an important thing that you're saying is get the numbers. I would say get the numbers or get the guests.
So that's what we find, right? Like, I mean, like when we're going out and pitching, what matters is who is our host, who is our guest. Because when we're pitching to brands, we're almost entirely pitching 10-episode shows now.
Yeah.
We're not pitching 52-week activities. We're pitching 10-episode shows. Who's the guest? Who's the thing? What are we doing from a social perspective? How are we going to shoot this so that there is sufficient social collateral available for this kind of thing? And what are the plans around that? How are we going to market the show? Because again, you're going to have to drive numbers. And driving numbers in podcasting happens if you do 52-week shows. If you're doing a 10-week show, it's really, really, really tough to drive big numbers there because it's a thing that builds over time. It's a habit that builds.
Got it. So, Seetal, would you add to that?
Yeah,
What should they carry in their proposals?
So I think the first thing is, why do you need the podcast for? In the space that is the external ecosystem, as Amit has rightly pointed out, it's a little tougher to carve out mind space. But I'll give you an example of Infosys. 13 years in running, we've been doing their internal podcasts. It had the form of a radio right now. Currently, 25 podcasts a month. The question over there is, why do you need that podcast? And are they all company podcasts? No. Actually, 50% of those are company Spock-related podcasts. 50% are, what's the difference between Gen AI and AGI? What do you need to know about the Dukan diet, right? 5 things you need to do about this or that or the other. So they are general interest that keeps them informed about what's going on, IPL or World T20 coming up, 5 things to look out for, teams, whatever. So if you look at the interest of the person, information, knowledge sharing, etc., that should tell the brand, hey, first, do I need this podcast at all? Because you can get long-term relationships going, provided the podcast answers very, very specific question. But it's a different matter altogether how much money you will make of them. Marketing internal comms budgets obviously are going to be way smaller than your marketing expense. But these are long-term contracts, and they do go a long way in building a culture of listening. Problematic thing is people, you need to build the whole story about what a podcast is, etc. But people, lakhs of people, 1 million plus people across the country in corporates, paying guys, already know what a podcast is because the company is giving them one. Do they listen to it? Different matter altogether. But you're doing that groundwork.
But at least that's a great